Hi, listeners. This is Grant from Brutally Delicious, back with another one of our little segments that we like to call Heavy Hearts, where we're discussing mental health and mental health matters with artists and musicians from around the world. And this episode, I'm delighted to bring on board probably the biggest act that I've had on here so far, Raine from Canadian rock and metal heavyweights Our Lady Peace. How's it going, dude?
Yeah, amazing to be here.
Thank you very much for joining me, mate. Especially with the busyness that you've got going on at the moment. But are you in Denver at the moment, I believe? Is that where you're playing tonight?
We played Denver a couple nights ago. We're in Lincoln, Nebraska tonight.
All right. Okay. I've got my dates mixed up there. So
That's
how's the
okay.
tour going?
It's great. Yeah, it's been amazing. Great crowds. Fans are out early. I think it's just an amazing night of music, with the three bands.
Absolutely awesome. Okay. So, I mean, the big one that we're going to look at this week is because you guys have essentially reclaimed an old song of yours, which I
Mm.
think is where the big mental health connotation is going. So I think that's where I'd like to start. For anybody that isn't familiar, um, your song from was it 2003 that
Yep.
whatever came out was released as part of initially it was released as part of a WWE compilation CD because it was used by the now infamous Chris Benoit in relation to his intro music, and Chris Benoit went on to commit some rather heinous crimes before taking his own life. So I suppose let's get started there. What made you decide to reclaim this song? Because I mean, it's a banger of a tune, but obviously we understand why you were reluctant to play it. So, what was the thought process?
We were putting together a tour in Canada. We're kind of like celebrating, we called it OLP 30. And it felt because it was a celebration, I reached out, put a couple posts up saying, hey, you know what? We want the fans to be involved in this. So, hey, we want you guys to help. Tell us what songs you want to hear, pick the set list basically. And I started to notice like every 4 or 5 DMs, people were saying, hey, I know you guys never really played this song. You probably won't play it, but I've never heard whatever. I'd love to hear it. And with those notes, I was just like, yeah, I don't think so. But then I got a couple DMs that were really, really thoughtful. People saying, look, I suffer from mental health. I've tried to commit suicide before. Um, I get why you wouldn't want to play whatever, but is there any way to put some sort of positive spin on this and help bring awareness for people like me? And when you get notes like that, you start thinking, okay, this is really interesting. If fans are saying that, I understood it. And so started to talk about it with the band and I was like, okay, maybe this is something we can do. And I think first step was like, I wanted to change some lyrics. Can we re-record the song? So we went back in with Nick Raskulinecz, Deftones, Foo Fighters producer, who recorded our three songs, a few months earlier with us. And we said, hey, Nick, we want to re-record this song. So we kind of updated the sound, gave it a little bit of a new energy, and I changed some of those lyrics. And so it felt like we were trying to turn, what was a negative into a positive. But I think it's worked because I've been talking about this song before we play it at every show, talking about mental health, ending stigma, kind of like things that you don't usually talk about at a rock show. But the fans are like engaged. They're cheering, and it's like, okay, I feel like we're coming a long way, as people, as like humanity, in terms of seeing mental health as like, hey, I hurt my arm. It's an injury. It's something that you shouldn't try to hide. And I feel like we're getting there. So I'm kind of glad we did it.
Absolutely awesome. It's in relation to those the what sounds like an overwhelmingly positive experience that you've got from the fans in relation to this song. Um, the general public often don't think before they speak. Has there been anything negative come back in relation to you
On
playing it?
You know what, Grant? Honest to God, man, I haven't got one DM where it's like, "How dare you?" or something like that. I think people are just, I think everyone's at that point where it's like, look, time heals, but the fact that we're not trying to exploit the song, we're trying to we updated it for a reason, and we're even talking about having some different singers kind of feature on it who are mental health advocates as well, just to show that this is like a vehicle that we want to use. The fans want to hear it, and this is the way they can hear it now because the other way wasn't going to work for us personally.
Absolutely awesome. In relation to the lyric changes, can I ask what specifically has changed about the lyrics? Like, which
Yeah,
lines
so
have you?
yeah, I mean, there's some new lyrics. I even changed a few melodies, but the idea of like being driven by anger was a line in the first version because I think that's what that concept was. But then when you flip it and you know what happened, I'm sure a guy like Chris was driven more by fear than anger, and I think um, being vulnerable and talking. There was probably some CTE issues there, not to get deep into the weeds, but we see that happen with any of these contact sports where that's really, it's destructive to someone. And I think changing it to being driven by fear is like the vulnerability of that line now really resonates with me.
I like that. I'm a wrestling fan. I'm very very familiar with
Yeah,
Benoit both as a character and as a person. And I get what you mean. You know, the driven by anger with the Canadian crippler thing and the way that he was personified in the ring very much set the character. But again, I very much agree. You know, I'm not scared of getting deep into the weeds, so to speak, because I think with Chris there was, you know, you've got substance abuse with wrestlers, you've got the grief that was involved with him losing Eddie Guerrero, and all of these
yeah.
different factors that got intertwined into the guy. Yeah, I guess that's where I was going in relation to, potentially negatives, as people just looking at it and going, they're giving it to a suicide charity and he committed suicide. It, almost like people thinking that that's a sympathy thing when that's not really the case at all in
No,
relation to what happened with him.
yeah, yeah. But at the end of the day, it's like when you talk about um those circumstances that you just mentioned piling up in someone's mind. I think it's about trying to figure out like when is a person in crisis, and and once that is, it's like you have to give that person and we have to feel like as a community like we have that agency to reach out and have and prevent these things from happening. So in a way, I've always felt like why we're doing this is obviously mental health awareness, but there's a sense of like prevention in it as well, hopefully, which
Yeah.
is hugely important. And we also partnered with an organization in New York called Artists for Action, who deal with gun violence, which is different than Chris, but the idea of like they deal with a lot of youth because I think when you look at mental health crisis, I think our youth, it's really tough to be a kid these days. Social media, getting these echo chambers. All the data is out there with Instagram and suicide for young women and the peer pressure and all this stuff. So helping kids realize that they don't have to suffer in silence, and also being identify kids when they're in school that, hey, maybe this kid's not doing too well. Maybe he's just not a dick, but he's actually not doing too well, and we need to find ways to help them.
I think I couldn't agree more. At my day job, I do work in mental health, and I deal a lot with people that are suicidal and what have you. And I couldn't agree more in relation to prevention. Thing I do think there's a lot of people out there that can, as you've said, people that are acting out say, "Oh, he's just a dick." It's like there's
Exactly.
so much unconscious going on with people, and so much going on that's bubbling under the surface that nobody seems really keen to scratch the surface with people that are suffering.
Yeah, we all have a story. We all have a story, and I think that's always important to remember. Because it's too easy just to dismiss people.
Absolutely. In relation to that story, that's where I'd like to move on to because, there's a lot of emotional themes involved in whatever, but there's a lot of emotional themes involved in Our Lady Peace in general. Songs like In Repair is one that I can think of
Yeah.
off the top of my head. Um, can I ask where those emotions like kind of stem from? And I know that you're working on new material. Is there still going to be that very what feels like a very personally, emotionally driven feel to what you do?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not a sad person, but I'm a very introspective person, I think. And I take on my wife's an empath for sure. I'm not there, but I do take on the world or people, fucking animals like get to me. And I think the idea that you're trying to find really repair like a lot of stuff, whether it's relationships or just dealing with your own emotions. Like we're always in this constant state of repair, I feel like, which is great because that means you're just trying to get better. You're trying to heal faster. You're trying to get over things better and just try to get to some sort of baseline of maybe not even happiness, but like being content and being accepting of the world around you. And sometimes that's really difficult. It's difficult for me a lot of times. Um, so I think a lot of the music always comes from that introspective look of like, or objective look of how do we help repair quicker? You know, how do we get to that repair place um, with less anxiousness and with less work, where it just we can find that emotional balance and emotional IQ where you don't wake up stressed, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely 100%. You kind of preempted one of my questions a little bit there when you mentioned the fan feedback in relation to whatever. So I'm kind of thinking on the fly here to try and switch it
Yeah,
up a
yeah.
little bit. With those messages that you received in relation to whatever, was there any particular messages that kind of stood out and you thought, yeah, I've got to do this? You know, was there a story that you were told, but, you know, obviously not naming names because that wouldn't be very good. But, you know, was there a fan story or a fan experience that made you think, okay, right,
Yeah.
I've got, yeah,
What, hearing, there's a few of these, but hearing fans talk about their own attempted suicides and like that they got to those really dark depths, survive them, and are still surviving. Like they're not healed, but they understand like the battle, the daily battle. It's kind of like an alcoholic. Like this is something that is always on you. And how do you just continue that struggle? And for them to I don't know, for them to be that vulnerable, I know it's just a DM, but I feel it. Like when you read these stories of these people, I'm so honored that they would share those stories. But I take them to heart, and they're all very thoughtful. And I just felt like, wow, if these people are courageous enough to let me into their lives and express and kind of admit their frailty as humans, I was like, you know what? Um, A, maybe there's a place for forgiveness for Chris and what happened, and maybe there's a move forward where again this is gonna not validate those notes, but show them that hey, I listen to you, I hear you, and I'm not just sending a smiley face back, you know, thumbs up. It's like no, I took what they said to heart, and we thought about it, and we did it, and just even if it's for those three people, it's like they were the catalyst for this. It's pretty amazing.
I think that's a lovely message for the fans, not just your fans, but for music fans in general to hear somebody talk like that.
Yeah, yeah, I was
You,
just gonna say, Grant, it's like fans matter. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
and they don't matter because they buy a ticket. They matter because they're human beings. They matter because we're all in this together. And that, in a weird way, this whole thing that happened with whatever, because it was kind of fan generated, like that. Hopefully, fans understand, like they did this, and they matter that much.
would it be safe to say with that viewpoint that you as an artist you do hold like a level of responsibility for the messages that you're purveying out to fans and making sure that you're giving them the right messages both in when you speak to the media like me or like the lyrics that you put out to ensure that they I don't know they get the right end of the stick.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I hate to ever be preachy, and I don't even like talking a lot, to be honest. But the idea that um, they understand the respect that we have and that we don't see a division of labor here. Like even at shows, we try to break down those walls right away. Like we understand we have jobs. Just happens that we're singing and playing music and someone's a nurse or a caretaker or whatever. Like none of that stuff matters to us in terms of ever dividing. So it's about trying to find that equity with fans. And I think that the whatever whole thing, hopefully it really defines the fact that that's how we just go about our lives.
Awesome, dude. You mentioned the organization that you're pairing up with, and I do have a question in relation to that because reading through, getting a little bit of sort of research done and what have you, and I came across a little bit of criticism that you'd faced in relation to stuff like the Occupy movement and some of your
That was a big
advocacy
one,
and
yeah, man.
yeah, like speaking out against gun violence and that kind of thing. I'm not here to criticize any of that. To be honest, I agree
Yeah,
with
yeah.
most of it. But from the perspective, especially with us talking about wrestling, I think, because I read something recently about how out of all of the like the people that are in the public eye, celebrities, if you will, that are out there, wrestlers get the worst end of it in relation to people hounding them on social media and that kind of stuff. And it's very closely followed by musicians. Do you think show business in general needs to do more to kind of protect artists that are in the public eye to stop this mentality of, well, they're famous, so we can just say whatever we want with them. We can tweet them loads of abuse. We can, I know, I get that it's a balancing act, but do you think there needs to be more support?
Yeah, I mean, I think just the word celebrity brings a lot of risk with it, because A, it means you're in the public eye, and B, it means that you probably have a lifestyle that is unachievable for a lot of people. None of this is true. It maybe exists like with a 1%, like a very, very few. But for most people, that's not true. But that's a stigma unto itself, that I think musicians have to fight. I think, athletes, I see athletes, struggling with mental health issues for various reasons as well. Obviously, wrestlers included in that. So I think it's a weird conversation, but I think you're kind of hitting on it in terms of there is a stigma against celebrity that is unjustified and very destructive. But at the same time, if someone asked me what your job is, I'd say I don't have a job. I've never worked a day in my life because I get to do what I love. So I think we have to be very cognizant that we in the same way, I'm out here working. I'm in Lincoln, Nebraska, touring. Touring's not easy. I'm away from my kids, my family, um, but I'm working. That these are jobs, and we're part of that whole culture where we're just, we get to do something great, but we're still out here working. And so that mutual respect for like the working man or working person, I think is gets undervalued. But that's how I see music, if I'm being honest.
Absolutely great, dude. I want to switch back a little bit before we tie this off because you mentioned social media and the negatives that come about from it. I read an interview recently where you were discussing TikTok and how you felt that there'd been a little bit of a loss in musicians honing their craft. Do you feel that we're kind of on the precipice now of music maybe going back to the roots of stages and albums and what have you, as opposed to 1 minute reels and
Yeah,
you know
that's a great question. I think it goes in. I think what we see now, because I think we're out of that TikTok thing in terms of like a musician getting signed from a 10-second piece of a song. I see it like literally on the grassroots and with, you know, even my own son, he's a musician, and a bunch of his peers, like people are getting back to being great at their instrument, trying to be great as artists, as songwriters. There's some super talented kids, man, that are um really taking advantage of even social media, where it's like, hey, you're following a bunch of guitar people because you're learning from them, or drummers, or whatever, producers. You can get into these rabbit holes on social media where you can follow like 20 producers, and they're giving you tricks how to like use Pro Tools or Ableton and how to produce songs better and how to. So I think that works for on all phases of being an artist, and I think that's really exciting because I think that the next generation of musicians, they're going to be super, super talented in a real way that will give them sustainable careers.
do you think that I'm not trying to suggest right or wrong here, do you think though that maybe that kind of culture has maybe got people that have got musical talent to deviate away from forming bands? That there was one particular guy I can think about that keeps popping up on my news feed. He looks like he should be, in the 1600s, kind of fighting in an Eastern European army. And this
Right.
guy has a voice like nothing I have ever heard in my life. Like he can mimic every metal singer to perfection, but he's not playing in a band. All he's doing is taking requests on TikTok and that. It,
Yeah.
it's kind of like,
You're not
will
wrong,
you go and
Grant.
front something?
Yeah, you're not wrong, Grant. That is not so much it's not so much a TikTok thing and being an artist. That's a music business thing. Um that is like the crisis of the middle class of music. And I don't want to be a downer, but it's like it's just hard to tour. It's hard to make money being a musician these days. So it's tough to have a band because now you got four or five people that, when you get a guarantee for $500, you get a split. If you're just by yourself, it's easier. I think that's the problem, an inherent problem with the music business in general. But there's ways around that. I think building these communities and using social media to get direct to fans is important because then all of a sudden you can start a band, and if you're selling vinyl and merch directly to your fans and not through third party platforms that take 30% or big rips, all of a sudden you can start crafting a little cottage industry for yourself. But that it's a much bigger question, probably in a whole other podcast.
Not a problem, dude. I'll last one and then we'll tie it off. Similar to the social media thing, is you've been around, you've been gigging since before the days of streaming and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And there's very much like a polar, not to the success that you've experienced, but I've been a musician myself. I've toured, I've put albums out and that kind of thing. Um, where do you sit in relation to streaming and how it affects not just the musician's ability to make money, but a musician's ability to be heard when everything is so swamped, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, 100,000 songs uploaded to Spotify a day, right? How do
Yeah.
you how do you fight that noise? The two things that are negatives, like there's some great things about streaming, great things about the fact that it's been democratized where anybody can record a song and put it up there and you can discover it and be like amazing. Like the way you discovered this kid on TikTok.
Yeah.
Do I like TikTok? Not really. But you found some really super talented kid that you might follow for the next 20 years and he might end up being a big musician. The thing with streaming that really bugs me is it's not the streaming rates are not fair, you know? So it's really difficult to make money. There's only a very small percentage that make anything close to like minimum wage streaming. So can those rates change? I'm not sure. I don't have a lot of hope for that ever changing, to be honest. And it's not to saying that streaming something doesn't come along that replaces it, because we've seen this with technology over the last 20 years. When you think something's there forever, it's not. Um, but the other thing about streaming is it really it doesn't take into account what it means to be a band, a songwriter, an artist, in the sense of what streaming is trying to tell you to do is you got to get in the algorithm. So you just got to keep releasing content. They don't see it as like art, where how many paintings did Van Gogh paint? He's not painting one every day and putting it up on Spotify, right? It's like it's the same with an artist. Like the idea of always, and I think this is something that Danielle Ek said, which I did not agree with, was you have to get out of the thing of an album. You just got to keep putting up songs. So he's just asking you to feed his algorithm so they can make more money. So I want to get back to where, or find a place of balance where people understand that artists aren't machines and they have to be inspired. And that's where great art comes. Because if you're just asking an artist to keep pushing out content, it's not going to be great. It's going to be diluted, and we're going to miss the whole point of what a great album is or what a great song is, because it's just not possible.
I love it, mate. And you honestly, like, I'm a little bit stuck here because you've echoed so much as to how I feel about the way, not just in music, but in film and everything. People do see it as content, they see it as product. It's almost like the view of music or film or literature or any of it as being art, as being kind of, it's had the edges shaved off it by this, as you said, this constant need to release. It's like just feeding the machine noises in the hope.
Yeah, you're feeding
It's
an algorithm. If you want to get into the algorithms, that's what I mean. Instagram will tell you that. If you want any success, it's consistency, right? Consistency doesn't mean art. It just those things don't exist together.
absolutely, mate. Absolutely. I'll tie it off here with my usual closer, Ren. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Ask this of everybody. For any of your listeners out there that are struggling with dark thoughts at the moment, what would you say to them?
Sorry, struggling with.
Dark thoughts, thoughts
Oh,
of suicide or horrible mental health
yeah, a
issues.
lot. Well, two things. I think music saves, and you have to reach out. Like you have to sometimes that first step of just telling a friend, telling a family member how you're feeling, that's the first stage to healing, but also in crisis. Like you gotta reach that hand out. And it's amazing. As soon as you do that, you realize how much love there is in the world, and how people want to support you, and they'll go to great lengths to make sure that nothing happens.
Absolutely, mate. Our message here is always not just talk, but if somebody is talking to you, make sure that you're listening to them. As you said at the beginning, no thumbs ups, no smiley faces, no okays or something like that. If somebody's crying out for help, fucking help them. You know what I mean? No matter what you do, the littlest thing could be the difference between somebody being here tomorrow and not being here tomorrow.
Yeah, that's very important. Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. We will tie it off there, Raine. Thank you very much for your time today, mate. I hope the rest of the tour goes absolutely incredibly for you. For all of our listeners out there, as usual, we've got a list of numbers in the bottom of our description for America and for the UK currently. If you are struggling, if you need help, reach out. There is always somebody there that's going to listen, and there is always somebody that's going to love you. This has been Grant for Brutally Delicious, signing off.